Today we're discussing the Canon R5C, a camera that I've really enjoyed using and that I was pleasantly surprised by. But first off, for disclosure, I borrowed this unit from Camera Canada, so I want to give a big thank you to them for always coming through for these reviews. They also lent me this lens, the 24-70 2.8, so obviously Canon didn't sponsor this video or have any input on its production, but this video does have a sponsor though, and that's Storyblocks. And speaking of this lens, this is actually the first time that I've really had an opportunity to use it, and I have to say, I really like it. It's a bit chunky, but the image is stellar, the build quality is excellent, it focuses smoothly, and there's almost zero focus breathing. It's a terrific zoom lens. And when combined with the R5C, it balances well and pairs up for a nice overall aesthetic. Although, to be honest, I find myself oscillating between appreciating Canon's new designs for their modern look and unique textures, and sometimes conversely feeling that they may seem a bit toyish at times. I haven't fully committed to an opinion on that yet, so I'll err on the side of positive and say that I like Canon's new looks. But I do think the grip should be a tad longer, as big hands like mine don't quite have enough space to firmly rest the pinky finger. And I'm still annoyed that I can't customize this back thumb wheel. I also find the buttons to be quite small. Now there's a lot of them, which is nice, but to fit them all on this body, they feel a little shrunken, and they might prove challenging with gloves on. However, if you're familiar with the R5, this is pretty much the same, and you'll feel very much at home here, other than the fact that it's bulkier to accommodate this fan. But the weight and balancing still feel very good. And yes, that fan does a terrific job of completely solving the overheating issues of the R5. Every mode I tried ran indefinitely without overheating, so rest easy on that front. However, in order to get the camera to run indefinitely, you need to power with USB-C. Do not expect much runtime out of this battery. The R5C's biggest weakness is that the old LPE6 battery system is just completely outpaced by this camera. You'll be getting less than an hour of runtime in most recording modes, and in the really taxing codec combinations, less than 30 minutes of record time is common. Now, I have mixed feelings on this. My initial thought was, the battery sucks, Canon's bad. And while I still think there's some strong arguments to that effect, I also think sharing the same battery system with the other cameras that you might be likely to pair with this body seems smart. You might not want your R5C to have different batteries to your R5 or R6. And then I also think of the Blackmagic Pocket cameras that also have this problem and basically requires you to either keep a pocket full of batteries or to rig for external power. We got used to that. I think we'll get used to this too. But then again, I'm not trying to be an apologist for a weak battery. You literally can't use the camera fully in 8K 60 without limitations, without providing additional power. That's the problem. I guess I just don't know what the solution is. Go back in time and change the battery system on the R5 and R6? Maybe that's when they should have changed battery types. What I can say at least is that I'm a big fan of USB power delivery, and it works perfectly on this camera and solves the 8K 60 issues. So that's good, because without that, I'd be much more critical about this problem. My second issue with this camera is the one that everyone's already complained about, the micro HDMI port. I don't know much to say other than this is bad, a completely needless weak point. Bad, bad, bad. And my final complaint about this camera is a minor one, and it's this photo video switch. I find when trying to switch it to off, which is in the middle, I almost always overshoot and turn it back on to the other mode. I find it surprisingly difficult to land perfectly in the middle unless I do it extremely slowly and carefully. It's a minor complaint, but I just wanted to warn you to double check that switch before putting the camera in your bag. I would have preferred a sliding toggle or at least a wider selection spread with more resistance between modes. But the best thing about the R5C is that I get to make little complaints about the mode selector because this camera is otherwise phenomenal, starting with that very selector. I love that I can switch over to video and have the entire interface change to match that of the cinema line. This brings several key advantages. First, you get much better monitoring tools like waveforms and false color, but you also have much more granular control over how everything is displayed on your screen. You get shutter angle, base ISO selection, anamorphic modes, and video-centric custom function buttons. It also unlocks the face-only autofocus mode, which is great for talking headshots where the focus won't change when talent leaves the frame and waits for them to come back. I love this feature on Canon Cineline. And when you switch back to photo mode, you basically get a full Canon R5 and it looks and feels like it should over there with the classic menus. And the R5 is a terrific photo camera, so this is a big win. Now the autofocus works a bit better in the photo mode because it has proper subject detection and tracking for more than just human face and eyes. The face and eye detection works quite well in the video mode and is the best I've seen on a Canon cinema camera, but if you're trying to track other objects, it's not as reliable as the photo mode because it only uses the basic and mostly indiscriminate box tracking method. What's good about that method is that you can activate it easily by just tapping on the screen, but it can be a bit fussy sometimes on what it's willing to track, and it's not nearly as sticky or reliable as Sony's system. But you can't record video when in the photo mode, so you're stuck with this slightly inferior autofocus engine. However, I have noticed a couple quirks that can make it better. First, if you're using the touch tracking, you don't want to use the default settings of 0 speed and 0 responsiveness. You want to max those out. I was quite disappointed with my first bit of testing using the tracking and noticed it wasn't keeping up with moving subjects until I tested maxing out those settings, and then the performance was a lot better. Now, doing this will make any focus racks a lot more jarring because it'll snap instantly. So I'd only use this for active tracking and not autofocus pulls. But don't forget, you can manually override for focus pulls. Now, when it comes to face and eye tracking, the opposite is true. You don't need to max out the settings. In fact, it doesn't really matter what your settings are once it's locked on to an eye. All the settings seem to do is control how quickly or slowly it first detects and racks to your eye. But once it's locked on, the speed settings don't seem to matter. So in summary, the video autofocusing on this camera is great for people or talking head, but it isn't as good as the R5 for other subjects. But you can make it work if you max out the settings for short bursts of tracking. But even with those quirks, it's still probably the best autofocusing camera in Canon's Cine line because it gives that extra bit of performance when you do max out the settings. It also has the digital IS mode that we've seen on their other cinema cameras because this camera, like them, doesn't have IBIS. I've always thought Canon's electronic stabilization was quite good on their Cine cameras though, and I maintain that opinion here on the R5C. But also, jumping back to this lens for a minute, the stabilization on this 24-70 is excellent, and I've been very impressed by it. Maybe the best I've seen for this type of zoom lens. So I'm gonna say it again, I really like this lens. You also get the full audio functionality in the menu when in video mode 2, which is appreciated. There's a built-in attenuator and manual gain control. But there's no switch for accepting a line level input via the 3.5mm jack, which would have been nice to see since without an extra hot shoe accessory, you're limited for audio inputs. But let's go ahead and do a test of the audio quality while I tell you about today's sponsor, Storyblocks. But to do this, I'm gonna have to use an attenuating cable from my Zoom F6 because otherwise that line level signal is just way too hot, even if you turn everything down in camera. That being said, on-camera microphones and other mic level sources shouldn't present an issue. So sometimes you don't have the shot you need, and there's no way you're going to be able to go out and get it before you run out of time, run out of money, or run out of patience by completely derailing your creative momentum. And that's where Storyblocks comes in. They've got subscriptions for every budget that give you access to a vast, royalty-free library with unlimited downloads, allowing you to use the footage worry-free for personal and commercial projects. They're also focused on enriching their catalog with diverse and inclusive content to provide useful assets to creators with varying needs and audiences. And this is all easily accessed using their intuitive interface with filters for 4K video at multiple frame rates, along with backgrounds and After Effects templates. If you've never browsed Storyblocks before, I think you'll be truly impressed by just how exhaustive their library is, and I encourage you to learn more about them by using the link in the description below. And if you want to hear what the fan sounds like, that's another sort of cosmetic complaint. I don't like flaps. I prefer doors. I find these hard to open and pain in the butt to close. Anyway, fan noise. This is while it's still recording. You can hear that it's mostly silent. And then when we stop recording and go into standby mode, the fan becomes a little bit more audible, but I doubt that, I don't imagine you'll be able to hear that very well through the microphone. So noise is not an issue at all. A couple other notable inclusions in the video mode. You've got time code with a dedicated port, focus ring customization to make it linear and allow for manual override, a tally light, and finally, the inclusion of an electronic level on a Canon cinema camera, something that has been frustratingly absent on their previous Cine models. This is the first time with Canon that I don't feel like anything was held back. This camera is fully loaded, and that includes customization options for codec and color. You've got 2 additional crop modes, Super 35 and Super 16, the choice between NTSC, PAL, and DCI frequencies, codecs for H.264, H.265, internal and external RAW, and the much appreciated addition of XF AVC in both intraframe and long GOP. And even though it uses mixed media with one CF Express card and one SD, redundant backup recording is available for the codecs that the SD card is fast enough for. And for the codecs that the SD card can't support, you can instead use it as a proxy drive, which is handy for the RAW files. Although, to be fair, I didn't find the RAW files to be as taxing to edit. This is likely due to the difference between the Canon RAW and the refined Cinema RAW on this camera. I found I was able to work with the files straight out of camera without proxies when it came to simpler edits. But of course, this will vary depending on your editing hardware. In the frame rate selection, you can choose from 24p up to 60p, and all of those are oversampled from the 8K, including the 60p, which is terrific. And if you want 120p, you can access that from the slow and fast motion mode, which does allow you to optionally record an audio track as well, so it's not as hindered when compared to the R5. but you will still see a slight reduction in video quality compared to the 60p and lower. And then just like you'd expect from a Canon cinema camera, you have control over your picture profiles with options for 709, log, HDR, EOS standard, and neutral, and empty slots for you to customize. But you also get fine control over things like noise reduction, which is awesome because it even has the ability to completely turn it off, which is a perfect time to talk about dynamic range. When the R5 came out, the biggest talking point was the overheating, and I did my share of testing and discussing about that as well. But after firmware updates came out and people developed workarounds for the overheating, many of my viewers wondered why I still didn't love the R5. And the answer, as I even explained in my original video, was dynamic range. I complained that even if Canon fixed the overheating completely, it wouldn't change the fact that the dynamic range in video on that camera was worse than the competition. And I was quite apprehensive that the R5C would have the same issue, since I was told initially it was the same sensor. Well, I'm happy to report that the dynamic range of the R5C is much better than the R5. Not only is it easily visible when just shooting a simple outdoor scene, bright skies seem impervious to clipping while maintaining shadows that are rich and full of detail, but synthetically, I frequently scored over a stop and a half better than the R5 using the Xyla 21 and Imatest. Here, let me show you my results. Okay, so starting here, this is C-Log 3 in XFAVC ISO 800. So this is sort of your baseline dynamic range with Xyla 21 if you just want to shoot 4K right out of the camera. This is oversampled from the 8K, so you're going to get good results. And we detected 13.4 stops with 12.2 of those stops having a signal noise ratio of 2. So that's like good, clean 12.2 stops, with about 13 total, but those 13 might be a little bit noisier. This is a great result, and this is much higher than I got on the R5. The R5, the best I usually got was about 11 stops. And then if we jump over here, we got the H265. This was just to see if there's a difference in the noise reduction between the 265 and the XFAVC, and they're both the same, 12.3 versus 12.2. Often H265 scores us a little bit better. Now we've got the ST RAW, which you can decode in DaVinci Resolve in 2 different methods. You could do C-Log 3 or C-Log 2. In C-Log 2, it's very noisy, and with the signal noise ratio of 2, I only have 10.8, but you can see there's 16 stops showing up. So this makes you think that maybe with some noise reduction, you can actually extract more than what you get with the other modes. And we'll get to that in a second. Now we have C-Log 3 developed from RAW in post, but these are on a 4K timeline, both of these. So if you put it on an 8K timeline, the results would be different because you're not getting that oversampling in post. And I think I have one of those to show you as well. But anyway, 11.5 stops from the RAW with no noise reduction. That's a really good result for not having any noise reduction applied. But if you look with C-Log 3, the total stops that it sees is only 13.6 versus the 16.1 that it sees with C-Log 2. So there's going to be a greater ceiling for C-Log 2 if you want to do noise reduction. Then this is the example here. This is ST RAW with noise reduction that I did in post to the RAW. And again, this is on a 4K timeline. And I was able to take that 16 stops and get 13 clean stops. And this wasn't hyper aggressive noise reduction either, like the detail was still there. So that's an excellent result. And then we have the same thing with C-Log 3, 12.6 stops. So both improved, but the C-Log 2 improved a lot more because there was more to work with in the shadows if you clean them up. But both of these results are great. And then this is if you take the 8K on an 8K timeline and you don't oversample it, you get 11 stops instead of the 11.5. So you get about half a stop when you oversample from 8K down to 4K. And then over here is custom noise reduction. So this refers to in-camera if you have noise reduction control. Now, if you have the noise reduction on default, you can see I got 12.1 this time. But if you put noise reduction on in the camera, and I think I set mine to about medium settings, then it goes to 12.8, and the noise reduction is really good in camera. So I found it difficult to even tell that it was on, and I got a better result than if I processed the 8K RAW and added noise reduction myself, which obviously is taxing in post. So you can just, the reason why I love the noise reduction control on this camera is you can, if you really wanted low noise, you could turn it on to medium settings and score a 12.8 with the oversampled 4K in XFAVC, which means your editing experience is going to be completely smooth and you're already going to have the noise reduction applied. So I was really happy with these results. As you can see, I'm averaging anywhere from low 12s to 13, depending on how aggressive you get with the noise reduction. And when shooting log, you've got dual native ISOs of 800 and 3200 with excellent noise performance in between, and even up past 12,800. And even when comparing ISO 800 and 25,600, there is very little color shifting in the image. And that color is terrific, and the workflow is as easy as it gets. You can monitor in camera with the Canon 709 LUT, which doesn't mess up your zebras or waveforms like the displays on some Canon cameras have in the past. By the way, setting your zebras to 95% should perfectly match the clipping point on your waveform and is maintained in post as well, so exposure is easy and consistent. But then in post, you can just drop on that same provided Canon LUT, and as I've said before with Canon cinema cameras, they have the best wow factor when it comes to a one-step adjustment. Just throwing that LUT on your footage makes it seem almost complete. So if you hate color grading, you'll be quite pleased with this camera's workflow. And the colors come out with a nice balance between pleasing and accurate. As far as I can tell though, you can't upload your own custom LUTs into the camera. You can only use the default Canon ones. And I also found that when reviewing clips in the camera, I wasn't able to use the LUT preview function for that, so they just look like log. I also wasn't able to use the magnify button during playback, which is a useful option while shooting. I sometimes like to check focus on playback by punching in and making sure the shot I just got was tack sharp. I can't really do that here. Overall, I'd say the playback engine on this camera could use some sprucing up to make it as good as the shooting experience. However, one thing I really like about the playback is that if you kill the power to the camera mid-recording and corrupt your file, you can recover it quickly and easily right in the camera from the playback screen. So that's nice to see. White balancing uses their cinema-style technique, which is that one-touch scene evaluation method. Canon has one of the best in the business when it comes to this approach. I prefer the controllable target box of the recent Sony cameras, but if you're going to use a camera that has a single press evaluation white balance mode, you want it to be a Canon camera. And this is of course much better than most of Canon's photo cameras that use an archaic photo recall method of custom white balancing. And finally, rolling shutter is solid for an 8K sensor. To me, it seems about the same as the original R5, so not the fastest when it comes to 4K only, but quite good if you consider the 8K oversample, and better than most of the other oversampling competition. So to wrap up, when it comes to the image processing of this camera, it's incredible. It's damn near perfect when it comes to a hybrid camera. And this is a true hybrid camera. As a photo camera, the Canon R5 was excellent. It just suffered a bit in the video mode. Well, Canon has taken that same excellent photo camera and integrated a video mode with a full cine interface, 4K 60 oversampling with no overheating, excellent dynamic range, useful raw recording options, proper codecs, autofocus improvements, and a no-holds-barred approach to menu customization. Now, all this came at the cost of obliterating the battery system, which is a shame, and it's comical that they didn't add a full-size HDMI port. But no camera is perfect. That being said, the R5C, in my opinion, is the closest Canon has come to creating a perfect camera. Not only is it easily one of the best hybrid options available on the market, but it's one of the best cameras I've ever used. Yeah, all right. I'm done.